debate and, formal debate, but also YouTube channels exploding with debate style content. But it feels like we're moving past that quite a bit. So, I mean, I'm sure you probably watch Alex O'Connor some, but
I do.
yeah, same. I watch him a lot, and he recently kind of gave that answer as well when he was interviewing John Lennox, and he was kind of explaining, hey, I could have pushed back on you a lot, but I've just realized that conversation's a lot more valuable, and people learn a lot more from that rather than the sort of formal debate where each person's going to say their thing and the debate's really not going to interact too much, and people are going to go away thinking the same thing that they thought when they started. So
exactly. Yeah. And I saw the John Lennox, and when I was prepping for this, I watched Alex O'Connor with Richard Dawkins, because both times he's talked to Richard Dawkins mentions that he doesn't think theology is a real subject. I don't know if you've seen those.
Yep.
And he reduces theology to kind of like logic chopping about like Bible verses.
Yeah.
And Alex even kind of, because Alex's background is in theology. He's an atheist, but of course he went to Oxford for seminary and everything. And he explains how, like the conversation that you're having with me right now, like trying to refute theological claims, requires you to study theology. Like even if you just want to use it as a debating tool, it's very ironic to like say that it's not a real subject.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, Dawkins is definitely in that same vein of the scientism, where he's very skeptical about philosophy and theology in general and whether it can get to truth or not. So I find the conversation he had with Jordan Peterson was one of the funniest things I've watched in a long time, where Jordan Peterson is very much all about like the meta and the philosophy behind the thing and the psychology, and Dawkins is just trying to say, well, none of that exists, because I just tell me the facts, and they were just talking past each other the whole time. It was almost like if you came for a good debate, you're going to be very disappointed, because it was two people talking in two different streams of thought completely.
Yeah,
it was kind of
felt
interesting.
like they were speaking different languages almost, because their starting points were so like spread apart. It was they couldn't even have a conversation because they didn't agree on the terms of the conversation in the first place.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I love watching that, especially when Alex O'Connor talks to Dawkins the second time, because he says, well, it's not a real subject, is it? Talking about theology, and Alex says something to the effect of like, well, what would you say to someone who's like a Thomist metaphysician? Like they've spent their whole life studying Thomas Aquinas, and they really have like worked out reasonable debates and everything within the discussion of just basic things like the existence of God, not even Christianity.
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you say to someone like that who reads your book, who reads The God Delusion, and there's 2 pages spent on that question, but they've got 2,000 years of very reasonable from their perspective theology, and you really don't do their claims justice. It's not about whether or not you believe that their claims are true, it's that they have reasonable arguments. So to say that the whole thing's not a real subject is really undermining your whole pursuit, because you're using theology to undermine them. It's just kind of
exactly
it's like the irony just doesn't hit him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because for Dawkins, the reason why he gives like 1 or 2 pages to answering the 5 ways from Aquinas is because he doesn't think philosophy is real, that it can get to truth. And it's like, if you don't think that, then don't even address it. Why even bring it up? Because as soon as you bring it up, now his book, The God Delusion, is infamously known as the worst attempt to deal with Aquinas' arguments ever.
Right. I think
so. I just don't even understand.
It literally does have a page, maybe 2 pages. So
yeah, I read it early on in my Christian life, and I can still remember. I can like picture the page of him talking about Aquinas' 5 ways, and it affected me a little bit then, but I had no idea what I was doing at that point. Like, I had not studied philosophy at a deep level at all. And all it took was reading 2 other guys who was like, he's trying to answer 1,000 years worth of philosophy in one page, and it was awful. And I was like, oh yeah, I see that now.
Right. Yeah. And that's the point that they make about theology on the show, is that it's like, you're the one talking about theology right now. You know?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Well, I don't want to make this too formal, but I did want to kind of set up the episode and just welcome you and thank you for joining us for the inaugural episode here. And
absolutely,
one of the things that brought us together was our Substack pages. So I definitely want to plug your Substack, and we will at the end as well. But just want to welcome Lukas Merrell. Lukas lives in St. Louis with his wife, and he works full-time on a church plant in the city, and currently pursuing your PhD in philosophical theology at Midwestern Seminary. And Lukas holds master's degrees in theology from Southern Seminary, philosophy from the University of Missouri St. Louis, and sounds like you're just interested in general in theology, philosophy, Christian Platonism, epistemology, theism, and you've done some writing in those areas as well. So really great to have you. I will not typically do this, but since it's the inaugural, I'll introduce myself as well and just kind of explain what we're doing here. I really think, we were talking about this off camera, but there's enough debate on YouTube. So the purpose of this is to just have a nice ecumenical discussion. Not saying that no one's allowed to come on here and disagree, but I think we have enough of what we were talking about before. So we want to cover some common area, cover some things that we think might be overlooked on those debate channels. Myself as a Roman Catholic, and having guests that are maybe of other denominations or maybe not religious at all. And some of this will just be, natural philosophy. Some of it will be more religious, theology-based, and some of it will just be life and classic literature and poetry, like you mentioned, and we might even talk about coffee a little bit towards the end. So,
absolutely.
Thanks for being the guinea pig.
Yes, of course. Glad to be here.
And it's funny how we know each other has nothing to do with this. And
so
we've
true.
actually never really hit this topic before, maybe briefly, but we met each other playing heavy metal music.
That's right.
And that seems like another lifetime.
It really does, yeah. I mean, what's funny is I've kind of kept that going a little bit, still writing at least and releasing some things here and there, but I haven't played a live show since probably living in Knoxville, Tennessee, so yeah.
Yeah, I kept gigging with like a blues rock band for several years, and I just kind of hung it up recently because it's hard to do with a toddler. But I still have a love for that kind of heavy music. It was not very radio friendly though, so it was hard to get gigs sometimes.
So true. Yeah, so true. I know. It was one of those things where I wondered if that type of music would be a phase for me, or whether I'd love it my whole life. And so far, I still love it. So
I do too. And I saw your Spotify post the other day, and I noticed that you had like Turnstile, and then you had classical music in there.
Yeah.
And I've really gotten into classical music the further I've went in my like philosophy career.
Yep.
And I wonder what do you think that's about? Like what appeal?
Yeah. I mean, well, Spotify must know something too.
To be walking stereotypes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, Spotify must know something too, because if you look up study playlists and stuff, it's classical music, and it's kind of always been associated with the academic world in some way. I think for me, this is kind of getting back to metal a little bit, but it's the complexity of it and the movements in it. It's just not something you can find on the radio all the time. I mean, some modern musicians have a taste of that, but for the most part, similarly to metal, it's very complex, lots of movement, very progressive. So I think it appeals to people who are into narrative and story and the bigger ideas because of some of those things. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't studied it enough to really know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it has something to do with that. I've looked into some like aesthetics philosophers that talk about this, and I don't know that I agree with this, but one of the theories on classical music is like the mathematical number of compositions that you can make, different keys and the way that you arrange the notes. Like there's literally only a certain number of ways you can arrange notes mathematically. And so the complexity that you're talking about is appealing to like someone who's really interested in like the structure of the music and is listening less passively, I guess. So I don't know how far I would run with that one, because you can have really simple music that's really beautiful. So that's kind of a tough one, but it's interesting. So
yeah, I agree. I don't want to put all the eggs in the complexity basket by any means.
Yeah.
Because there is a beauty in simplicity for sure. But there's also something there about complexity, especially when we're, like I said, kind of what we see normally is the more simple music that is popular, the more catchy, earworm, radio type music. So I think, I mean, this gets into a ton of different topics, but I think that humanity in a lot of ways are starting to long again for some of the old classical, complex, more beautiful, more deep things in life. And yeah, classical music's one of those for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great segue into some of the things that we were wanting to talk about, just about like objective goods. We've been talking a lot about education and specifically learning about philosophy, learning about theology. You know, I'm a philosophy student as well. I'm finishing, hopefully going to graduate school in the fall, and I get the question a lot, which I'm sure you do too. People say, well, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
And when they say that, what they're really saying is, how does that make you money, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I like to say, like, what will I not do with it? You know, like
it's good.
It frames my whole world. You know, like
there's
nothing that I do outside of the context of my like philosophical worldviews. There's nothing that I do outside of the context of my faith. So when people ask me that, I'm like, well, you know, I will literally do everything with it, but I think what you're asking me is, how do I get a job with it?
Yeah.
Which I may not, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a modern question, isn't it? Because it's, I like to tell people, if people were more connected to history, I think these questions wouldn't come up as much, because philosophy and logic in particular, they were requirements for people in school in general. You know, if you went to, if you were going to go get educated, you were going to take a philosophy or logic or reasoning or rhetoric, you know, all those types of things. You're going to take those classes. And so it was just kind of common acceptance to do that then, but it's not now. And I mean, we could go through the history of why that's kind of the case, but I think it's kind of obvious that it's more about your trade and how you're making money. We live in a pretty capitalist world these days, and so it's not super surprising. And that's not to hate on capitalism at all, but that's just to say, like, that's where we're at. And
it's just the practicality of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, a funny story of someone asking me a question like that you just presented is that I'm not going to name who it was in Cody's family. Cody's my wife. She told someone in her family what I was doing, you know, going to get a PhD in philosophy, and their first question was, okay, well, what's he going to do for money? What's the other thing he's going to do for money? Because it just seems like that's a fun thing to do, or something like a hobby is almost how they were treating it. And you know, but that's a good opportunity to share that money isn't necessarily everything in life. So
yeah, it's very interesting, and I look at it the same way you do, and neither of us are against the practicality of school for, you know, learning a trade or
Absolutely.
You know, getting a job. Like, obviously college is valuable for that.
Definitely.
But college, and not even college, just educating yourself on these topics is intrinsically valuable, right?
Yes.
And I think we live in a world where everything is subjective and everything is material, to the point where it's like, well, that might be good for you. And I'm like, I'm actually making the claim that it is universally good, which is, it doesn't strike people the first time. Like, you really have to say it like, no, like, I think it's good for you. I think it's good for everyone in all circumstances.
Yeah.
Which is, it's tough for people with this really modern subjective view on things.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because I think if I was to answer why is it good for people, it would be something along the lines of, well, it's soul forming, or like it forms you as a person when you are studying things that are challenging, philosophy, getting a way of seeing the way of thinking that maybe is very foreign to you, a way that humanity has thought for forever, basically. And yeah, it changes you as a person when you do that, and then allows you to, kind of like what you said at the start, enter the world applying it to everything. But I think, unfortunately, that idea of changing you as a person has really just been relegated to the self-help area of books and learning and that sort of thing. And I think it is, honestly, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think it is that idea that we've moved away from objectivity, and so now it's, what is the personal thing for me in my life that I can find that will help me get better at blah 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 blah. And it's not going to be the same for everyone, so I got to go find my perfect self-help book that'll touch on my experience and all that. And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
honestly.
I think the language has even adapted to that. Like when you hear people say something like "my truth" or "your truth," like there really is no such thing as my truth or your truth. There's just truth. Something cannot be subjectively true.
Right. Yeah. When I'm talking to someone and it kind of goes down that road, I do try to at least point to some commonality where we agree that there is some objective truth. And my quickest go-to for that is always math. I don't know why, but it just, when you confront someone with 2 + 2 is 4 and you have to agree on that, and we are both agreeing on that and there's no way around it, it actually opens the door to realize, okay, there might actually be a method or a way to get to some truth that is unable to be, refuted or something. So
yeah, that's probably a better method than mine. When I get into these subjectivity talks, sometimes, and I know that there's plenty of like good moral philosophy that would have a lot of answers for this, but it may be more of a rhetorical device, or something like that. But whenever I'm talking to someone on the subject and they're not quite convinced, I usually hit them with something that's very obviously morally evil and try to get them to say that it's subjective. And usually they cringe to do it. Now, philosophy types that really want to remain consistent, they'll do it, and no matter how nasty it sounds. But
I've seen Peter Singer do that a lot.
Peter Singer does it for sure. But your average person that hasn't convinced themselves that they have to be consistent to the secular philosophy, just your friend, if you tell them like, okay, so like, is murdering thousands of people evil or not? Like, it's not evil to you, or evil but not evil to this person. Like, it's just evil, right? And typically you can at least get them to concede the fact that like there are at least some extreme things that are just always impermissible, which to me means that they're objectively wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's good. Yeah, I have actually went down that road quite a bit with the moral arguments.
It's a little bit darker than math. But.
Well, it's that's true, because unfortunately, being a philosophy student, I've been confronted with all the typical examples that you give, and it's always about Hitler or about killing people, and so the trolley problem.
I have a professor at Franciscan that says philosophers love to kill fake people.
That's hilarious. That's pretty true.
Yeah, Dr. Gage says that, but it's very unintuitive to be morally subjective, I think. You almost have to convince yourself of it. It doesn't come naturally. Yeah. So we're usually not fighting an uphill battle until you start getting into, like you talked about with the new atheists and like people who are really subscribed to that sort of like Dawkins philosophy.
Yeah, I think people need to just be hit kind of in the face with the reality of the possibility that there's some objective truth. Because I think about this a lot with progressive political ideology. It's the ultra progressive people are kind of just progressing for the sake of progressing, and they haven't even stopped to think, what are we progressing to? And I'm not sure there's an answer to that for them. So just even having that conversation of, hey, is there a certain standard you're trying to hit? What is it? And if not, then you have to admit you're just progressing ad infinitum, and that's it.
Yeah.
But if there is, then
think
now we're talking about objectivity. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. And American politics kind of has that problem in general. Very conservative folks want to just keep something, and sometimes they haven't defined what it is. And very progressive folks want to move towards something, and they haven't always defined what it is. So, I think that faith,
true.
church tradition really fills in those gaps to me, especially like church history, and St. Paul even says to cling to these traditions and that sort of thing. And I know different denominations have different ideas of like what traditions are sacred, but even outside of the context of religion, I think that tradition is so valuable for that purpose, because what's worth preserving, and what's worth progressing, right? Because you've defined tradition really grounds us in reality in a lot of ways.
I fully agree with that. Yeah. I mean, I know some Protestants they get freaked out by the word tradition, but I'm not one of those by any means. I agree with everything you said. I think that tradition and sort of the broader term of maybe liturgy, or like a liturgical life, a liturgical tradition, that sort of thing, just something like rules to live by, all that idea. Yeah, I think that's pretty essential, because if you don't have anything tethering you to the world in that sense, then that's what postmodernism is.
Yeah. I mean, it's how we make sense of things in a lot of ways. Like, even just little, like, your family always does this thing on Christmas or whatever.
Sure.
Everyone loves those kind of touch points to tether them back to like why this means something, and like what the purpose of it is. And it's really how we make sense of reality is, you even hear people say like the scientific tradition on this topic, or the philosophical tradition on this topic. Like, you have to have some cultural context around what you're doing, and say like, these are the things that we want to keep. These are the things that we don't want to keep.
Yeah.
It can't just be blowing in the wind. And that's what we get with American politics, I think. Conservative, liberal, the whole thing. Things just kind of blow with the tide of like the political culture, and they're not really rooted in like cultural tradition. Sometimes they are. Like, there's plenty of things that happen in politics that might coincide, but politics cannot be your... Like, if I ask someone what their worldview is, and they start talking about like American politics, something's wrong there.
Yeah, a red flag for sure. Yeah. Which goes back to the original question, why people should study philosophy and theology.
Right.
This is it. Yeah, they need to be grounded, need to be rooted for sure.
What do you think about philosophy and theology, or the lack thereof, in primary school, like K through 12? In the United States, well, maybe with the exception of certain private schools, or certain religious private schools, you really don't get, especially classical philosophy. What can we do in that area, or like what would you encourage someone to do that maybe goes to a public school to get their kids interested in this type of thing? Or what can we do to kind of shift the tide there?
Yeah, that's such a challenging question. I think recently, like maybe the past 3-ish years, I've had a little bit of a burden for the academy and also school systems in general, and just wanting to see a return to sort of what liberal arts schools used to be, with the classics department being very serious, philosophy, religion, that sort of thing. Because it's definitely a dying thing in the school right now. And so, I actually don't have kids, so I don't feel personally connected to this currently, but I know a lot of families that are wrestling with this exact question, and a lot of them have done private school, which I think is a great option if you can afford that. Unfortunately, they're not cheap. But also, I know a lot of people that are doing a mixture of, hey, my kid is going to public school because that's all we can do right now, but we're going to teach them at home as well. Teach them the things they're missing, whether that be, philosophy or religion, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't think I have a great answer at the K through 12 level, but I think this is part of why I encourage people to go get degrees, though, and teach. Because I think there's, in some ways, the way to fix this is to send more people to get trained classically to then go teach at schools.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that's a fool's hope, but I do see the tide turning a little bit in that, which gives me some hope. I've seen a lot of people, at least on the internet, who share these same convictions do that and have good effect at some schools doing that. So, yeah, I would want to encourage that a lot more as well.
In your undergraduate, were there any philosophy requirements as gen eds for all majors?
Yes, there was one. You had to do one philosophy and like one arts type thing. So
we had that too at East Tennessee State.
Okay, cool.
It was like a practical reasoning, which was basically like logical fallacies and maybe like
that's exactly what mine was
and stuff. Yeah. So I think that's good at least. We'll give the state of Tennessee some credit there.
That's right. Yeah. But I mean, I went to Carson Newman, and Carson Newman University is a liberal arts school that I would expect them to do more of that. And I think they used to, from what I can tell looking up their history, but they've kind of gone away from that a little bit because that's the trend for all schools, is that you have to pour more money into the things that make money, is the idea, the prevailing idea right now. I actually was just reading, I've been following a philosopher, her name's Jennifer Frey. I don't know if you've seen her if you're on Twitter or X or anything like that, but she basically was working in North Carolina as a philosopher, but then got essentially scouted to go to the University of Tulsa and rebuild their department and make it exactly what we're talking about, like focus on classics and philosophy and all these things. And she was there for, I probably get the times wrong, but at least 10 years doing that, and had great success. Hired a bunch of new people. She was the dean, like overseeing all of that. And it was incredible. But then literally last week, she just got unexpectedly fired and removed from her job because I know, same. Yeah. And it seems like the whole community that was rallying around her and saying, you did an incredible thing. You fought the good fight, in this world, that's so against all of those classical types of learning. So yeah, it was sad to see, but also kind of like, hey, she did do some good there, though. It's incredible. That'll have long lasting effects. But
I think this is kind of moving into something else we wanted to talk about, because people that are in the same situation as her, I've seen a lot of either people in academia or who have left academia. They really seem to be flocking to a couple of places, and one of the big ones is Substack.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I would really like to talk about like what your experience has been there, how it's been, doing freelance writing, and sort of maybe we'll satisfy some of the people with the what are you going to do with that question with the fact that like we're putting out something that's consumable, so
that's a good point. I started by reading a lot of Substack. I'm sure that's how you came across it as well. I just started seeing people that I respected and philosophers posting on there. Jared Henderson was a big one, if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, I love Commonplace and all of this.
I think I read in your article, I think you referenced him a couple of times. He's definitely someone who was obviously in the academy and who left it, worked a normal, like a tech job or something, and then decided he missed it and, started making YouTube videos and then writing on Substack. So, definitely a shift there from the academic world, but it's been good for him. So,
yeah, I think it kind of gives people hope that want to just put stuff out and just let it land where it lands. Because someone like me, like I work as an engineer. My full-time job is I'm a computer engineer, but this is what I love to do outside of that. So it's a really good outlet for me to like put out some kind of academic writing, do some things. And I even parlay some of my school writing into that, because I'm developing my thesis for graduate school between now and December, and
awesome.
It keeps me fresh to write and have an audience and have people like you to read and give me feedback, and I think it's just an awesome platform, and it also keeps me off of Instagram. And
I was actually about to say that I think that why it's so successful, or at least why I see so many people stating this, and I definitely resonate with it, is that it is in the midst of all this 5-second TikTok, Instagram reel type of content, it is reintroducing long form reading text. And that is something I think people have been longing for a while again, and it's clearly having an effect. I mean, I saw when they added like a reel type function to Substack, unfortunately, and the whole community just went in an uproar. And I was,
I thought that's why we're there, is to get away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're trying to escape that, and it's chasing you. But yeah, I think what you said, I think all that's true for me as well. I sort of did it. So I finished my master's in philosophy, which is my second master's, in 2021. And I intended to go straight into a PhD program from there. But I was coming out of COVID, and I was getting a little bit, school got weird during that time. And I got a little bit burnt out on Zoom video, doing my schoolwork that way and all that. And so I took a bit of a break. And I discovered Substack as a way to ease back into writing and reading long form, because it's a little bit like a muscle. If you just don't use it, you start kind of losing it a little bit. And so once I knew I wanted to enter back in and start a PhD, it was okay. Well, I want to start writing again instead of it just being in my journal, and more short form. So yeah, jumped on there and started doing that, and really, really enjoy it. And the funny thing, I think you alluded to this too, is I have like 30 people that subscribe right now. It's like, I don't know if anybody's reading it. It's going out into the wind, but like, it's still something so fulfilling about doing that. And
absolutely,
even when one person engages with you, it feels incredible, because this is what you love to do and love to talk about. So
exactly,
cool.
Yeah. And it goes right back to what we were talking about in the beginning. Like, is there something that's just good about it? You don't have to
100%.
measure it in all these ways. Like, it's just good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm interested. Do you have time to read for pleasure? Reading for a PhD?
That's a good question. Yes, but I'm still learning the balance. I'll say that for sure. I've been trying to be very intentional about scheduling out my day, because I work, like you said in the intro, I work a full-time job on staff at a church, and so it is definitely a balancing act right now. But usually before bed is a great time for me to read for pleasure. That's a good way to wind down. So 30 minutes before falling asleep, I'm reading our Brothers Karamazov right now, Dostoevsky.
I saw you were reading that. I'm reading Crime and Punishment.
Oh, nice.
Which is my first foray into Dostoevsky as well. So
that was my first read of him, and I loved it too. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's not the best bedtime reading. It's pretty gnarly. It's pretty dark. So sometimes when I'm reading that, I just started it 4 or 5 days ago, so I'm about a quarter of the way into it, and it's a little unnerving to read him going to bed. I'm not sure. I want to read the Brothers Karamazov because that comes up in theology circles a lot. Yeah. So we might have to do another show just on books.
Absolutely, yeah. We could talk about that for forever.
Yeah,
but yeah. So
I was wondering, how you even find time to read as much as you do.
Yeah, that's what it is really just before bed. But I also have blocked out I think a sleep schedule is everything. I know that's probably hard for you with a child and probably the chaos of life that I don't have to experience as much. But good 7.5 hours of sleep, and I usually wake up at 6 a.m. and have about 2 hours before I start my day where I'm doing more personal reading, so developmental, or reading other philosophy topics that I'm interested in that's not necessarily to do with my research. So I think that, although since starting the PhD, that time has gotten randomly cut down where it's kind of like, yeah, it'd be nice to read for 2 hours, but I probably can only do 1 hour and then have to get into some school stuff. So, yeah, still figuring it out, but try to fit it in where I
always
can.
tell myself that I'll read something light because I read so much philosophy for school that it's kind of sometimes tough to read philosophy for pleasure in the evening, and then I find myself reading like some 700-page classic or something. Like sometimes I just kind of step away from it, read a comic book or something, or just read, like a fiction novel just to kind of balance things out. Jared Henderson talks about this on Commonplace Philosophy, where the way to read more is to stop waiting for the perfect moment to read, and to carry a book around with you instead of a phone. He literally carries a book around with him, I think, is the way that he put it. Like, he just kind of holds one.
That's incredible.
And Bill Gates has this thing that he talks about he walks around with like a burlap bag with books, and when he travels and stuff, he carries physical books with him. He doesn't use a Kindle.
Love that.
And I think there's something to be said for physical books, which we can talk about.
Absolutely.
But two is, if you just don't have, like, we're really, I have a bad habit of, if I have 5 seconds of downtime, I grab my phone. Like, it's just like an immediate habit.
Yeah.
So if you just use your 5 seconds of downtime to read 5 pages, if you just do that randomly throughout the day or throughout the week, you'll be amazed at how much it adds up. Like, I had to really learn that, because I would wait, like, as soon as everyone's in bed and I've caught up on everything and I have this perfect like reading time and it's quiet, and I'll sit in my office that I've curated for like this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Those moments do happen, but if you only wait for those moments, you'll never get as much content as you're wanting to, and you'll kind of beat yourself up for not having the perfect time, right?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think the carrying the book around thing is something that I started doing fairly recently, and it has had a great effect as well. Just, it actually makes you realize how often you want to pull out your phone.
Yeah.
It's the simplest things of just my day-to-day life, going to a coffee shop and, I'm waiting on my drink, so I'm going to pull out my phone. Nope, I'm going to pull out this small pocket-sized book that I'm carrying with me and read it. Yeah, it's stuff like that. It is nice, honestly.
What are your thoughts on? I would like to know your thoughts on physical books, but just physical media in general. I'm really big on taking notes and not using my phone for notes, and I carry these little notebooks around. These little field notes. I have them with me all the time, and one of my reasonings for it is, one, if I'm hanging out with someone or they're telling me something, if I'm writing, they know that I'm engaged with them and that I'm just taking notes. They don't think that I'm playing on my phone. Two is that we are physical beings at the end of the day, and having a notebook that is literally sitting on my desk, I walk by it and I'm like, oh, there's my notes. Like, let's see like what we've got going on. When I look at a phone, I do not see notes. I see
it doesn't tell you anything.
Like, it doesn't trigger that, like, oh, like maybe let's sit down and write a little bit, like think through it. Like, this only does that, which I love about it. I try to leave my phone. Like, sometimes I try to just leave my house without my phone, which doesn't always work well with like having a family. People need to get a hold of me, but I at least leave it in a different room while I'm doing things. And you can get into the studies on like, when you write things down, you remember it more and blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't think that really matters to a lot of people, just because the phone is so convenient. So I think you can engage people more on this topic by appealing to the practicality of it, of saying like, look, if I'm writing in this, I'm not going to get a Facebook notification that breaks my train of thought. This is all it does. Right?
Yeah, that's so good. I agree with everything you said. I carry around a bigger size journal, just always in my backpack with a book or something, and so I'm right there with you. I mean, occasionally I'll record voice memos on my phone, which feels a little bit like less weird because I'm not engaging with the screen as much. I don't know. It's a weird mental thing, but but for the most part, yeah, taking notes physically. And then as far as books, yeah, it's there's something about the physicality of all this that is so important, that I think that we are embodied beings living in a physical world, and I think the delight that comes from me from flipping pages, holding a physical book, and like looking in my library and seeing books on the shelf, it's always so inspiring to me. Rather than, this is no hate to Kindle users, but just rather than looking at a Kindle or something, which is just a piece of plastic that produces text or something, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I agree. Like, the beauty of the object is conducive to what you're doing, you know, and I flip back and forth between a Kindle just for practicality and whatnot.
Sure.
But if I have something that I really love, or that's like a classic, or like something that I want like my kids to have, or something that I want to let a friend borrow or something, you lose all that on a Kindle.
Yeah.
And also, you never really own it, which gets into kind of another realm of like the philosophy of like ownership and like digital goods and everything. You know, Amazon is a huge thing right now. It's almost unfathomable that Amazon would not exist, but it's possible, you know. 50 years from now, 60 years from now, you might not have Kindle books to hand down to people or to pass on. And you know, think about like library, like the Vatican Library, or like these prized institutions that we have. Like, imagine if that were a Kindle laying on a desk, you know, like we engage with these physical things, like it's good for you. And then the practicality that I like to invoke is, you know, like I've got a book laying down here. If I'm reading a book and I'm physically holding it, if I want to reference back, like, oh yeah, that kind of reminds me of this. You physically know where it is, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like on a Kindle, you got to like tap the right amount of times and like try to find it. And if you want to take notes, it's just, it's not the same, you know?
That's a big one. Yeah. Even doing my research for PhD, like obviously you're looking up online journals and stuff, but I print almost everything out that I'm going to use, because I cannot stand just looking at a computer screen. And yeah, you can highlight things in PDFs and whatnot, but it's just something so almost frustrating to me that I can't hold it and interact with it. And so I always, my wife like makes fun of me because I waste so much paper, but I'm always printing out these journal articles and marking them up with a pencil or pen and highlighter and stuff. Yeah, it's something about it.
Yeah. I had a logic course, and this kind of gets into a little bit of the AI stuff and like the digital realm, but I in a logic class that I took at Franciscan, the professor required us to write out all of the syllogisms on paper, scan them in. One, I think, was to prevent cheating, because, you know, logic is something that's very easy for an AI to do.
That's true,
because it literally only has one valid output. If you were feeding it like, you know, like scenarios and text, it might struggle with it a little bit. But if you're just saying if P then Q, you know, it's so easy to just do that with an AI. So I think one of his things was it cut down a little bit, because even if you're cheating with an AI, at least you wrote it down and might have learned something.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then the second part of it was what you're talking about, like that tangible. It's just really not the same typing it out and only working with that one medium. Like you really drew each character, and the way you connect with it is completely different. And I think there's really something to be said for that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, my example of that too is taking Greek in seminary, and I'm taking some more right now to like keep bolstering my Greek knowledge. And every time so far, our professor has made us write out the Greek, even though technically that's not the reason you need it, because, you know, you're learning Greek to interpret or to read the New Testament, you know, in its original language, or to read early Greek philosophers or something. And it's like, you don't necessarily need to know how to write it, but our professors really have believed in that, and it goes back to everything you just said, like the idea of tangibly interacting with a language in every way that you can, reading it, writing it, speaking it. Yeah, there's something to be said about using all of our senses that way and all of our tools that way, I think.
Yeah, I think like I love getting an old book or like a used book that someone has studied with and it has a story, and like you just do not get that out of a Kindle. Like there's like sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. I saw this in my camera, but like this is a perfect example because like I could get this on Kindle. Yeah. But this is, ethical theory. It's Timothy Fagote, which I'm sure you've come across, and this is like 1959. Someone studied with this in some philosophy class in 1959, and who knows what they got out of it. Now I have it. It's got a story. Yeah. And it's just got so much character and like the style, the binding and everything. And yes, at the end of the day, you're just reading it and you would get the same content on a Kindle, but man, is that different.
No, I'm with you. Honestly, my relationship to writing in books and buying books that have writing in them and things like that has really shifted a lot. I went from when I first started getting books to just going straight into it, writing, using highlighters and stuff, to then feeling like that was bad. So I think I went through a little bit of a collector's phase maybe of, well, I don't want to buy books that have that because that's annoying, and I also don't want to do it because I want to keep these books pristine. But now I'm back into, man, how cool is it that there's a story and that you can just write in the margins and because I shop for books mostly used, which I'm sure you do as well, and you find something and open it up and there's just a cool note written down, and it can really it can send you on a journey and a story. And I learned that from a living poet named Malcolm Guite. I don't know if you come across him.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Malcolm Guite. He's the Anglican priest.
Yeah. Yes, he's one of my favorite people on this planet. I watch his YouTube videos once a week.
He's got a lot of great Tolkien stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, Tolkien and Lewis he's big on all that, and like Coleridge and things. But he was the first person to kind of say that and to put that enchanting idea of the story that you're picking up from, imagine where this book has been. When you write in it and then pass it down, someone else will, like you're continuing the story and that type of thing. And I think that really hit me finally of the goodness of physical books and passing them down. But I do only write in pencil. That's my only rule now. I don't like highlighting still. I'll write in pencil.
That's a good compromise.
Yeah, I think it's a good compromise.
I cannot imagine Malcolm Guite owning something that's not 100 years old.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he does his little videos in his library, and he'll just be like, "Hey, I haven't shown you guys." Smoking his pipe, and say, "Hey, I haven't showed you this yet," and it's some, ancient copy of Samuel Taylor Coleridge from the 1700s or something, and it's like, oh my gosh, where'd you find that? Of course, he has access to that in being in England a lot more than we do. So,
I love that, and Malcolm Guite even. Just his whole philosophy on like the object itself and like how we connect with it, because I'm really bad about wanting to have a new thing as well, and even like his pipe smoking and stuff. Like how cool is it to get like a tobacco pouch that someone used and loved, and like it has all this, because I remember I don't know if this is like a C.S. Lewis thing or something, but like pipe smoking is really big with a lot of theologians, a lot of philosophers, and there's actually the whole philosophy behind it of the reason you do it is because it takes so much time, right? It forces you to sit down, go through this methodical process, and really it's very relaxing and contemplative. It's not like a cigarette where it's like, I'm going to get this done as quick as I can and like get back to my shift. It's like a cigar, like Matt Fradd on Pints with Aquinas, he's really big on cigars. And I think the reason that it appeals to theologians is because they need time to sit and think and contemplate, and doing something that's very methodical But at the same time, it doesn't require all of your attention. You can kind of just relax and puff on it. Maybe I'm just justifying my tobacco pipe smoking, but it's an interesting thing. It's why is it so common with theologians?
That's 100% what it is, and I mean I've picked it up occasionally as well, and I really enjoy it. But for me, it really is just it's a meditation, is what it is. It's a slowing down of the mind. It's thinking through each individual aspect of what you're doing. And it's not just. I think it does go hand in hand with philosophers and theologians, but I actually also saw a guy on YouTube who was kind of an Appalachian type of guy who
I know. Do you know who I'm talking about? Pipe Cottage.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'll have to look up his name so that we can shout him out. But
yeah, I had no idea who this guy was, and I think I got recommended one because I probably clicked on a pipe smoking video somewhere, and hearing him talk about it just sold me even more. Like, this guy, he's so thoughtful and puts so much intentionality behind pipe smoking. And I think the one I watched was he was giving rules of, like, if you're going to be a pipe smoker, you got to do these things. And so many of the rules were just things that I wholeheartedly endorse. The type of life that I want to live, being slow.
About the YouTube algorithm because of the fact that I've seen this.
Yeah.
But I know exactly who you're talking about. His name is Alan Harrelson.
There you go.
And I believe he's a professor as well.
Okay.
He specializes in like Southern agrarian philosophy, and I believe he's a Catholic convert as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't know all that.
Yeah. Aquinas. But yeah, he really breaks down the pipe philosophy.
Yeah, I loved it. It was so good. And yeah, a lot of it was what you were saying.
Chesterton has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because Chesterton really loved his glass of wine and his pipe and everything. So, but there's a reason for it. We can justify it.
Absolutely. Yeah, just got to convince my wife more.
That's a different story.
That's true.
Yeah. So my wife, her grandfather, he actually had a PhD I believe in education, and he grew up in Appalachia, and I don't think that, like, my wife and her brother, I don't think they realized how incredible and how rare that was.
Yeah.
Because they were, it was just their grandfather. They were used to it.
Yeah.
And when I've learned about him and heard stories about him, he liked to smoke a pipe, and I actually have some of his pipes in some of his books. And I was, when you mentioned Dr. Harrelson, it made me think about that a lot, because he really liked to sit down, smoke a pipe, read, and he was probably just smoking the pipe in his living room or whatever. He didn't really worry about it. Our wives probably wouldn't let us get away with that.
Nope. That was the big rule, not in the house.
Yeah. So I've got his tobacco pouch, which is like kind of like a Malcolm Guy thing, Like, I could have went and bought a tobacco pouch, but like nothing is as cool as this, like with the family history and everything. So
I love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I really I want to kind of rapid fire on AI.
Great.
So we can't get away from talking about AI, so
I know
we might as well join in. And I just really I want to be optimistic, I guess, about how it affects writing.
Yeah.
How do we deal with it? Like, how do we approach AI? We see articles all the time that are reportedly written by AI. Like, we've even had some big publications that have been accused of using AI writing.
Yeah.
And, for you and I, we've talked about the intrinsic value of, like, you can't take away the goodness of us creating within our writing, but how does it affect, people like us or Jared Henderson that are putting writing out if someone makes a Substack and the whole thing is written by AI? Right now you could probably tell, but who's to say 4 or 5 years from now, you might not even be able to tell anymore that it's written by AI. So, like,
yeah,
it's a real can of worms.
It really is. I mean, to be candid, I have so many concerns about it that I think I've always I would describe myself as pretty pro technology, or at least like cautiously optimistic about most technology in my life. I mean, I'm old enough I lived when the smartphone was invented, and like I I could see some dangers, but also thought it'd be okay. It's a good thing. But with AI, it really is concerning me more than it is giving me optimism. And I think, to your question in particular, I don't know. I'm pretty convinced that it will be really hard to tell the difference between AI and a human writing. But not everybody shares that. So I've seen a lot of people still making the argument that there is something deeper with humans interacting with language, writing words. There's some sort of deeper connection there that you can, when you read it, and if you're familiar with that, you can actually still tell it has a human touch. I've read a lot of articles that have kind of given specifics about what those human touches might look like. And I guess, man, I mean, I guess you can.
I hope so.
I was gonna say, I guess you can, decide right now. Like, will you hope that's true? And I kind of do, or will you be very, cynical about it and say, nah, it's going to be literally impossible to tell. I'm not sure.
I think this might open up a rabbit hole, but I think that one of the things that we can do is kind of use AI to fight AI. So if we have these really big AI models, we'll be able to use the same AI models to detect if something came out of it, right?
Yeah.
And they can almost like watermark their own work.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we're so behind on is the regulation. It's exploding, and I hate to say like that the government has to be involved in every little thing, but we have to have some common sense regulation around disclosing when something is made with AI.
Yep.
One, because it's going to be used to harm people with fake videos. They're going to be so incredibly realistic you won't know, and just obvious harm can come out of that.
Yeah.
Two is the writing that affects creators and everything that comes with that. So I really think we have to have some kind of legislation that says if something is generated with AI, it has to be disclosed. If we have good probable cause to prove that it wasn't disclosed, and we have good watermarking technology that's reliable, we have to do something. It's a tough one, though.
It is. I do agree with that. I think that the government, at the very least, needs to protect its citizens, and I think that falls underneath that in a lot of ways. From protecting from harm, because there's been a lot of harm that's already come from AI and what people have believed to be reality, and it's not. But also protecting, identity and property and originality and that sort of stuff as well. I think I also just thought of another way that it's affecting writers. Something that I've been already having to deal with is, Chat GPT. One of the signs that people have pointed out is the M dash. So that this for whatever reason, Chat GPT has favored using that M dash in sentence structure more often than not. So you'll see it use the M dash rather than like parentheses or something if it's adding an extra clause. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I've seen people on Substack now start at like in their biography or in their on their newsletter, maybe at the bottom, say, I like using the M dash and I'm not AI. They're having to start disclosing that. And I was even thinking about adding that because the M dash is very popular more in the kind of poetical writing because it provides parentheses are seen as more of like a harsh stop, and the M dash provides a little bit more flow. And so I've always really enjoyed using it. I think it makes a sentence more beautiful. And now I'm worried. Like, I don't want people thinking I'm using AI, so, and I'm not going to stop using a language because language is more, it's more bound to me than it is to technology. I shouldn't have to give up something that's so human because of that. So that's a big concern as well.
I think you're right. What you said at the end of that is at some point we just have to choose to preserve things that are uniquely human.
Right.
And we just have to maybe even arbitrarily, and it's not arbitrarily in terms of like it being good. It's arbitrarily in terms of like, just because we have something that can do something doesn't mean we should. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
If AI can write everything, great. That doesn't mean we need to do that.
Exactly.
And you know, I almost, if we were in a world where AI could write and cover all these subjects so perfectly that they are outperforming what we can do as humans, I guess, we almost just have to say we're just not going to do it. Or like, you know, to me, it's really just an extreme version of like fraud that's always existed. Like in 1905, you know, in 1700, you could have put out a book that you didn't write and said that it was yours.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this isn't a new thing.
Yeah.
You can put something out with AI and say that you wrote it. We've always had Photoshop. You know, you could make fake images that were very convincing. Like, you've been able to do this for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's not a new thing. It's just an extreme version of it that's almost too easy. Like, we've always been able to fake content, and we just have to use our judgment even more, and we have to value the human interaction even more. The one thing that makes me optimistic is, I think in a world where you're constantly questioning whether something is legitimate, maybe it will force some in-person interaction, maybe. And what I mean by that is, like, if we were in a world where AI was so good that you really had no idea what was real and what was fake, you might like to go to a lecture and hear the person. Because then you can't fake it. They're there in the flesh. You know, we might see an uptick in those kind of things. We might see an uptick in, you know, in-person study groups and, you know, lecture tours and this kind of thing. Because people are going to crave the humanity of it, no matter what. We're built that way. We're going to need it. So the only optimism I have in like a hardcore AI world is that people will just reject it.
I do share that exact thought with you too, and it does get back. I mean, this is the theme of the podcast episode, is just the intrinsic goodness of these things. I
wasn't expecting that overarching.
I know, right? Because if your theory is right, it will be because there's an intrinsic good to human on human interaction, going to lectures, human writing, you know, that sort of thing. Like that, I think that desire for the good will show itself in people eventually. And I was literally talking to a friend about this earlier today. I think that you're right, and I think the way that we'll also see it is in people actually giving up their smartphones, because it feels like there's a big desire in the world now to give up a smartphone, but the response is, but I can't.
Right.
And you know, and then you can list your reasons why. You know, some are more important than others, but I think if there is a world we live in where if you're so used to getting your information and everything from your smartphone, and now you can't trust it at all, you have no idea what's real, then you're not going to use it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, I've seen there's some startups that are really ambitious about just automating all work. They think that basically anything that a human can generate, it can be automated, and that will free us up to do whatever. And I think they're overlooking the really obvious thing that if there's nothing for us to do, we also won't have any income to do whatever these things are that we've been freed up to do. We literally won't be able to afford them without UBI or something. And two, I think they're really just overlooking like the goodness of work and the dignity of work. And you know, there's tons of theological literature on this, of course, of just work is dignified because of the fact that you're doing it. Not because of the fact that you're super important and that you do special kind of work, and then there's people that do, you know, not special kind of work. The act of laboring is dignified. in the Christian tradition.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we see that in the creation narrative, and we see that in the garden, and I think we should expect that in eternity as well. So I think that at the start and at the telos of humanity is some version of work, and I think it's couldn't agree more. I think it's a good as well.
I can't. I'm hard pressed to think of many examples of someone with millions or billions of dollars that just does nothing and is just happy being
right.
rich. Like they all have to continue doing something. Like someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, like they could stop now and buy a whole beach resort and just live there for the rest of their life and just be on perpetual vacation. But why don't they do that? Right? It's they have to continue doing that dignified. They have to have purpose, and they have to do something.
Absolutely.
Like everyone needs that. And in a fully automated world where you're just freed up to have perpetual leisure, that's not something that's conducive to human flourishing. Work actually is.
Fully agree. Yeah. It's like, it's kind of like that famous Jim Carrey quote that I'm going to butcher right now, but he basically said at one point that he's received everything he could possibly imagine: money, cars, wealth, and all that, and it still wasn't enough. And he's interesting because he's also taken up painting and doing philosophy and still working in the movie industry
Human
and stuff
things.
as well. Yeah, exactly. Human things. Like he's actually someone who's getting it or realizing that it isn't just about the products you receive. It's about what you're doing with yourself, your soul,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I talked about that in the last Substack article a little bit about consumerism briefly, and just how like that ain't gonna cut it. you know, just getting by on consuming it just won't work. So, well, I really appreciate the time. We're gonna try to keep this one around an hour. So, again, I'll have all of your Substack information in the bio and links, and if you have anything in particular that you're working on that you'd like to shout out, we'll do that, and we'll include it in all the info on the page.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I think the thing I've been trying to define what my Substack is going to be in a lot of ways, and I think that I've just realized I'm writing about a lot of this stuff we're talking about, but more so just from the angle of the goodness of exploring the divine in all things is kind of
That's great.
the big heading of it, and so that how that plays out in art and philosophy and language and things. Yeah, it's been a joy to explore that.
I'll plug one of your more recent articles for you that
Sweet.
I really liked. It was about prayer, and we have this really modern idea of, or like an evangelical idea of prayer it's very transactional of like, I need this thing or I've got this problem. And, I think I moved into that a lot in Catholicism. Not that it doesn't exist in the Reformed traditions. It
Sure.
absolutely does. I just embrace it a little more there. But even like we were talking about walking around with a book, when you have 5 seconds, you can do that with prayer. You can just
Absolutely.
be walking around, having continual dialogue and just talking through these things. You don't have to be saying things that are wrong. You don't have to be saying things that you need. You can just be like acknowledging the glorious, creation and creator, and just appreciating and just dialoguing. And that's really an ancient idea of prayer. And even things like the rosary, where you're repeating things a lot, and things like, like the Jesus prayer, like there would be monks in medieval monasteries who would say those prayers, just literally walking around, working, farming, and they're saying it all day long. They're not asking for anything. They're not, they're just dialoguing. So I would really encourage everyone to go read that on your Substack, because it's very good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's honestly been one of the biggest gifts in my spiritual life, is understanding a larger view of prayer than what I kind of grew up thinking it was. So, yeah,
that's great. All right, it's been great. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
See ya.
See ya.